Welcome to another exciting, wonderful, beautiful episode of Rock, Shovels, and Manuscripts.
Somebody get him some more coffee.
Hi, I'm Rick, and this is Steve. Steve, where are we going today?
Well, we're going to visit Tel Dan and Tel Hazor this morning.
Okay.
Hazor, Hazor.
Okay. And that's how I know it as.
Hazor?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Sometimes I hear these words in Hebrew, and I'm not sure how to pronounce them in English, and sometimes I hear them in English, and I don't know how to pronounce them in Hebrew. So.
We all are going through that.
So I thought one of the things I wanted to remind our viewers of exactly what a tel is. The word tel is...
Please tell me.
I was hoping you wouldn't do that.
Please.
The word tel occurs constantly in archaeological conversation.
Okay.
Not to be confused with Tel Aviv, even though it's the same sounding word.
Now you're confusing me.
Yeah. The word tel refers to, and by the way, tels are very unique to the Middle East. You don't find these types of things throughout most of the world. Imagine you want to set up a military post in the ancient East. So you find a spot. It may have a hill, but chances are it doesn't. So you dig a huge dry moat, and you take all that dirt, and you put it in the middle. That gives you a man-made hill.
Okay.
On top of that, you build a wall and a fort, maybe even a small town. Now, over time, you're going to be overrun. You're going to lose a battle. Maybe even an earthquake will come and knock down your fort. But it's a good location. You still got the little hill there. If you could just fortify it and make it stronger, maybe you can win next time. So pile some dirt on top of the old remains of what was there. Maybe use some of those stones in your next building and do it again. And again and again.
So it keeps getting higher.
Keeps getting higher, keeps getting deeper. And over years, you could have 20 civilizations represented in one tel. But it makes archaeology difficult too, because if you dig down, are you finding the ruined remains of one thing, or is it tied into the other? So I think archaeology is often an art and a science.
Yes.
But a lot of the ancient sites in the Israel area are tels. Ancient fortifications and cities that are layered through time that help us understand things that happen when we dig up portions of them.
And the reason that they would build a mound, if you will, or a fake artificial mountain is so that have an advantageous position in the area. So they could see,
it's military. It gave them a farther view.
Yes.
But when you're fighting, you want the high ground.
Yes.
And if the spot you want to be has no high ground, you make the high ground.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Dan, extremely famous, a lot of stuff going on there. It's cool that the headwaters of the Jordan River come from there.
Yes.
There's 4 big springs, Bonias, which is just a few miles down the road, but Dan has probably got the biggest flow of water, and it heads down into the Jordan River into the Sea of Galilee, the Sea of Galilee back down the Jordan River to the Dead Sea. And the reason it ends at the Dead Sea is because it's the lowest place on earth. The water can't go anywhere else. And over time, the water evaporates, but all the sediment stays, the salts.
Yes.
And that's why the Dead Sea is dead. It's so salty. But because so much of the Jordan River is being used by Israel and Jordan, the Dead Sea itself is drying up. I mean, it's still huge, miles long and very, thousands of feet deep. But compared to what it was just 40 years ago, so Israel and Egypt have made an accord. They're going to run a canal from the Red Sea to the Dead Sea to start replenishing some of the water in the Dead Sea. They're going to take some of that water and purify it to drink, the water from the Red Sea. They're going to use probably hydropower to generate electricity, and they're going to replenish the Dead Sea.
Brilliant.
They say Israel's got 3 seas, the Red, the Dead, and the Med.
Oh.
All right, so
that
back
is
to Tel
really
Dan.
bad. Do not take my job. I get the bad jokes.
I saw it on a shirt in Israel. What can I tell you?
What's next?
So some of the things they found at Tel Dan, they found what they call the Middle Bronze Gate from the Middle Bronze Age.
Yes.
This puts us close to the days of Abraham. We're talking close to 2000 BC. They found a gate that's been preserved to this day. And we've got the Iron Age gate. The Iron Age is closer to like the days of King Ahab, 9th century. So we're jumping forward almost 1,000 years from this one gate they found to the other gate they found.
Yes.
This is what you do, it tells.
Yes.
You find different things, and based on their construction, their material, how low they are, how high they are, they date them. So if this gate dates to the days of Ahab, then this was undoubtedly the gate that the kings of Israel and the children of Israel used. It's almost certainly
right.
dating to the days of biblical events.
And these are two places that I have been, and they're amazing, both of those gates. Absolutely amazing. And when you look at what's called Abraham's Gate,
yeah,
it is absolutely amazing. It just is.
When I see something that dates to the era of Abraham the patriarch, it just gives me goosebumps.
Exactly.
I was at a museum in Istanbul, Turkey, and as soon as you walk into the grounds of the museum, there's this huge set of lions carved out of stone. And they're about, I don't know, 5 feet tall. I mean, they're huge. And there's a little sign that says, you know, these date to about 2000 BC. You're like, wow, they're there. You can touch them. Abraham might have touched them. This is awesome.
Exactly.
It's just so cool.
Anything that brings us closer to the words of the Bible, I'm there.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
So we've got the Iron Age gate. We've got the Bronze Gate. They dug up what they're calling the podium for the ruler, but they don't really know that it was the podium for the ruler. Right next to the gate is some sort of special set-aside place.
Yes.
And they guess, well, since at gates, leaders of the towns and the rulers met to discuss, to rule, to judge, to marshal, maybe this is where he stood. But there's also some indication that at the gates there were shrines and idols. Let me give you a couple of examples.
Okay.
2 Samuel 18:4 says this. So the king stood beside the gate while all the men marched out in units of hundreds and of thousands. So I said it's a place of marshaling.
Yes.
Maybe this was where the king stood. So they dug this thing up. They knew it was a special place right next to the gate, but they're not sure why it was used. This is one possibility. The other comes from 2 Kings 23:8. It says he broke down the shrines at the gates. Well, we know that the Israelites were not good. They didn't worship God alone. They worshiped all sorts of idols, specifically the golden calves that they made. They worshiped Baal for a time. So who knows what sat at this gate? They found the place where it was. The greatest archaeological discovery at Tel Dan is the Tel Dan inscription.
Yes.
The Tel Dan inscription is a portion of stone. They don't have the whole thing. It's kind of broken, and so they have to reconstruct what it says. Some of it is debated, some of it is not. The part that's debated, let me read to you. As Joram, son of Ahab, king of Israel, or Ahaziah, son of Joram. But the part that's not debated is of the house of David. The reason this is significant is because outside of the biblical record, which, by the way, is an archaeological artifact.
Yes.
We named our program Rocks, Shovels, and Manuscripts. And I don't think anybody would disagree with this statement. Manuscripts are most valuable.
Yes, absolutely.
We can learn so much more about
Yes.
ancient history from manuscripts than we can from rocks.
Yes.
When you dig up a rock, you have to guess. When you read a manuscript, you know exactly what they thought. Now, what they thought may or may not be true.
Right.
But at least you know what they thought.
Yes.
You knew what they said. And if they said something about an historical event, you could compare it with other manuscripts. And by manuscripts, I'm referring to things also carved in stone and on pottery. If it corroborates, then you know it's true. There are many things that corroborate with the biblical account. But one thing they had not found until the Tel Dan inscription was ancient evidence outside of the Bible for King David.
Yes.
So this led many scholars foolishly to conclude that David was a myth, that the ancient Israelites made him up. Then they found the Tel Dan inscription.
And what you're saying is not a small thing. It's a huge thing. And even seminarians for a long period of time were questioning the validity of the life of David.
Which drives me nuts.
Yeah, and it undermines the message of the Bible, the story of the Bible, the history of the Bible.
Well, and that's what happens. They take the Bible for some bizarre reason, spiritual warfare, spiritual blindness, but for some bizarre reason, as a religious book. But all the other documents they dig up in the ancient East as having archaeological validity for learning about the times of the people, but not the Bible.
Even if they're religious in content.
Yes,
of course.
They were religious people.
Of course.
You know, a lot of that stuff was religious.
Yes.
But when the Bible says it, they don't accept it.
That's
the
right.
most attested to ancient document we have.
Yes.
Then we can't take it for what it says.
Right.
But if they dig up a piece of pottery that backs it up, then maybe. Crazy, crazy, crazy. So they dug up this piece of inscription that mentions the house of David. It's back from like the 7th to 8th century. So this validates what we knew to be true, that David was a real person. When a foreign king, because this stele comes from what's believed to be the conquest of foreign kings, his comments about beating the house of David. So he recognizes the dynasty of King David. Pretty impressive.
It's very impressive.
And it even looks cool.
It does look cool. But you know, you brought up a very significant point, and that is the validity of the Bible, the historicity of the Bible is so absolutely important for understanding the ancient world. We think of the Annals of Caesar, for example. We only have just a few copies of those things, or Herodotus, or those, you know, and we rely on these historians, but we have very few copies. The Bible itself, we have more copies, authentic copies, accurate copies, if you will, of the Bible, the Old Testament text, the history, than any other ancient book.
And not only do we have more copies, but the time between the events and the original writings and the copies we have are the closest than any other set of ancient books.
Right.
So you're right, we might believe that the writings of the kings, the annals of a king, or the writings of even Shakespeare, there's such a big time frame. And then if you were to read the books of Herodotus or Shakespeare or annals of certain kings, they would have such great differences in what they say.
That's right.
Whereas the manuscripts of the Bible don't.
No. Yeah, close in proximity of time and also in geographical setting.
And content.
Yes, and content.
The Bible is extremely trustworthy.
Yes.
In fact, when we come back from our break, I want to read to you some story that brings us to the area that we now know as Tel Dan.
Which is really important because that was a significant site in the history of the Israelites.
Oh yeah, it was a key location for many years. It was, in a sense, the capital of the northern
It's a
kingdom
beautiful
for a short
setting
time.
as well. Right by the Jordan River. It's just absolutely fantastic.
Pastoral,
you can still go to those gates. Okay, well, don't go away because we're coming back with even more important stuff. We'll see you in just a minute.
See you in a bit.
GLC invites you to visit us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/GLCTV. Here you can stay in touch with all of the latest GLC news along with daily scriptural inspirations, current specials in our bookstore, links to our newest shows, and online media, plus articles from trusted sources. Feel free to drop us a message or a question by posting to our page. Please help us out and like our page by clicking on the thumbs up button. Don't delay, drop by the GLC Facebook page at facebook.com/GLCTV. We want to interact with you today.
Welcome back to Rock, Shovels, and Manuscripts. Steve, where are we going now?
Well, we've been talking about Tel Dan, but I really didn't give the history as to its significance. Jeroboam, when he started the northern kingdom of Israel, he moved up there and he set a shrine in Dan and another in Bethel. And what I want to do is help the people understand how Israel divided into two kingdoms, Judah in the south, Israel in the north. And this is why Dan becomes such a significant place. But it starts back in 1 Kings. So if you don't mind, I'll read a bit.
Sure.
Jeroboam was a man of standing. He was an upright man. He was a good guy with a good reputation. And when Solomon saw how well the young man did his work, he put him in charge of the whole labor force of the house of Joseph.
Okay.
So about that time, Jeroboam was going out of Jerusalem, and Ahijah the prophet of Shiloh met him on the way wearing a new cloak. The two of them were alone out in the country. It says he was wearing a new cloak. Back in those days, a new cloak was extremely valuable. Not like clothes today. We can go to Walmart and get a shirt for $10. We can go out and get a jacket for 20 to 50 to 100. No, back in those, maybe an Armani. A cloak might have been similar in value to a car.
Wow.
Yeah, extremely valuable. You had one, and you had it for years because you couldn't afford to get another. So this prophet's wearing a new cloak. This becomes significant. Ahijah took hold of the new cloak he was wearing and tore it into 12 pieces. So, new car, you go out with a big hammer, a jackhammer or whatever, and just hammer it into 12 pieces. You're going to get people's attention.
Exactly.
He does this in front of Jeroboam, and Jeroboam's probably thinking, prophets, they're all nuts. What are you doing? This could feed you for a year. What are you doing? Then he said to Jeroboam, take 10 pieces for yourself, for this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I am going to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand and give you 10 tribes. But for the sake of my servant David and the city of Jerusalem, which I have chosen, out of all the tribes of Israel, he will have one tribe. I will do this because they have forsaken me and have worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Moloch, the god of the Ammonites. Already, right after King David's lifetime, they're already worshiping multiple gods in Jerusalem.
It doesn't take long for people to fall away from their faith.
No, it does not. One generation.
Yes.
They have not walked in my ways, nor done what is right in my eyes, nor kept my statutes and laws as David, Solomon's father, did. But I will not take the whole kingdom out of Solomon's hand. I have made him ruler all the days of his life for the sake of David, my servant, whom I have chosen, and who observed my commands and statutes. So I'm going to take the kingdom from his son's hands and give you 10 tribes. I will give one tribe to his son, so that David, my servant, may always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city I chose to put my name. However, as for you, I will take you, and you will rule over all that your heart desires. You will be king over Israel. If you do whatever I command you, walk in my ways, do what is right in my eyes by keeping my statutes and commands, as David, my servant, did. I will be with you. I will build you a dynasty as enduring as the one I built for David, and I will give Israel to you. I will humble David's descendants because of this, but not forever. Solomon tried to kill Jeroboam, but Jeroboam fled to Egypt, to Shishak the king, and stayed there until Solomon's death. So here's what's going on. Because of Solomon's sin, turning Israel into a place of idolatry and turning his back on God, God's going to take the majority of the children of Israel and give them a new king. Jeroboam. What an honor. God is going to make a whole new dynasty. He already promised David a dynasty, so he can't go back on his word. But nobody says he can't make a second dynasty, bigger and better. Jeroboam just got selected to be the next King David. You've got to understand the honor.
That is significant.
It's huge. He could have been the one we always talk about.
Wow, the great king.
Right. But it's David. Still it's David. Jeroboam does something stupid. He becomes evil. This is what happens. He goes away for a while. He comes back. Solomon's dead. His son Rehoboam is king. Rehoboam meets with the representatives of all the tribes and says, I'm the new king, do what I say. And the people said, you know what, we will do what you say, if you're a little more considerate than your father was. His tax burden was too heavy. His labor requirements were too severe. So Rehoboam meets with his advisors, and the advisors say, what the people ask for is good. Give them what they want. They will trust you and follow you forever. Then he asked his young buddies, what should I do? Don't listen to their whining and complaining. You're the king. Oh, you tell them what to do. They complained about their taxes. You give them more taxes. They complained about the labor. You give them more labor. Rehoboam, being the young idiot that he was, took the advice of the young men, not the advice of the mature men. And he went to the Israelites and said, hey, I'm king. Do what I say. I'm going to raise your taxes and increase your labor. Jeroboam was there. Jeroboam said, come on, Israel, you come with me. And at that moment, the kingdom was divided. Now, God said he would give Jeroboam 10 tribes. But he didn't say when, where, or how. That's Rehoboam's foolishness and sin. Didn't have to happen that way, didn't have to happen at that time.
Wow.
But it did. So the kingdom was split from that point for the rest of Israel's Old Testament history. They never got together again.
All because of pride.
Yep.
Foolishness.
Yep. So Rehoboam goes north. He thinks, though, you know what? I got a problem. The temple's in the south. It's in Judah. I don't want my people going to Judah to worship. We'll never be separate from these people. They'll always want to go back. I will not have a strong dynasty. God said he would. He didn't trust God. So he decides, I've got to do something. And in his human wisdom, he says, well, if that's where everybody goes to worship, we're going to have our own worship here. So I will set up a place of worship just north of Jerusalem on the border of Israel and Judah, which is our southern border, and I will set up a place of worship on the far northern end of our borders. Dan is the northern place where that golden calf was set up, and Bethel, just north of Jerusalem, was where the golden calf was set up in the south. Dan and Bethel. You realize they found the place where that golden calf was worshipped in Dan. That was one of the sites that they uncovered.
Yes. Yes, I've seen it. And it sends chills up your spine to think of the arrogance of doing your own thing without even asking God, God, what would you want? And God already gave them the command of where to worship him. So it's going directly against God.
And not only that, it's not like they'd even have to ask. You don't set up a golden calf. We tried that once before.
Of course. I was talking about location.
I know. But duh.
Right.
He went from being the honored, chosen, upstanding man of God
yes.
in one day to being a devil worshiper,
and
if I can exaggerate.
They already had the lesson of the golden calf.
Yes.
So, I mean, come on. Location is one thing, but really, what are you trying to worship?
It was foolish.
Yes.
And this became a sin for the rest of Israel's history. What Jeroboam did was extremely popular and influential. Mm-hmm. He ruined an entire kingdom. So, David is the man we talk about for good. Every time we talk about a good king of Israel, David. Every time we talk about a bad king of Israel, Jeroboam. All the kings of Judah are compared to David. He was good like David, or he wasn't good like David. Mm-hmm. And all the bad kings of Israel are compared to Jeroboam. He did just as bad or worse than Jeroboam. What a shame.
It is.
Zechaval in Hebrew. What a shame. So the idols are set up. The kingdom is divided. Now, let me help people understand when this happened. We got to go back to our 2,000-year period that I break up into 500 years chunks to help people understand Old Testament history. 2000 BC, and these are approximates.
Yes.
Abraham. Whack off 500 years, that puts us at 1500 BC. That's the days of Moses. Whack off 500 years, that puts us at 1000 BC, the days of King David. Well, David's son was Solomon, his son was Rehoboam. This is when all this happened. So we know we're somewhere around 900, somewhere BC. Take off 500 years, you're at 500 BC, and that's when Israel and Judah are destroyed. Israel 700 BC, Judah 500 BC. The temple's destroyed 500 BC. Children of Israel dispersed. They come back, take off 500 years, we're at the days of Yeshua. So with 2,000 years and 500-year increments, we can look at what's going on here and get a good estimate as to when this happened.
That's a great way to remember biblical history.
It's the only way I can do it. It has to be simple. It has to be close, but no cigar. All right, so that's Tel Dan. We don't have time now. What I'd like to do is bring everybody back for our next episode, and we'll talk about Hazor, Tel Hazor, because there's a lot that goes on there from the days of Joshua on forward to this very day where people can dig and see things that are going on.
And there are active archaeological digs going on at that site. I remember that Biblical Archaeology Review has done a lot of articles on Hazor.
I find it amazing that something that Joshua saw and touched, ground he walked on, you can walk on.
Yes.
A place he destroyed, you can see the remnants of that destruction. The place that Solomon rebuilt, you can go there. Touch a gate that Solomon himself walked through. I just, I find it thrilling.
Even though Tel Dan is a sad story of what took place there, it is an amazing archaeological site. And it's very, very large. It's one of the most significant sites in Israel.
It is. In fact, Dan and Hazor are two of the biggest ones, Hazor being actually the biggest one.
Wow.
That is the biggest tell, not necessarily the biggest archaeological site. We've got Caesarea, which is huge. Yes. We've got the one down south, help me out, with the big city with the one of the oldest tells.
Beit Shan?
Beit Shan, thank you. That's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, archaeological digs in Israel.
Also at Tel Dan is the water shaft. That water shaft is huge. It's really amazing.
And if I'm not mistaken, the water shaft at Dan, the water shaft at Hazor, the water shaft at Gibeon, the water shaft at Megiddo all have similarities to show that some, Solomon and maybe Ahab, some of the same kings controlled these same areas because the architecture was similar. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. But that's a gigantic site. There's a lot to see in that area. When people go there, it's definitely a must-see site. It's just sad that the story is so disastrous for them.
I know. It's something similar to just down the road where Bonias is. Another of the headwaters of the Jordan. Beautiful pastoral site, lovely, and yet you think of all the people that were killed there. You think of the pagan worship that happened there. God gives us good, beautiful things. And yet we take them and we ruin them.
It's a sad story of the humanity that we tend to do our own thing and despise the things of God instead of following.
But there are good lessons to be learned, and that's why we study these things.
That's right.
So we don't repeat their errors.
Exactly true. Well, we're very glad you joined us with Rock, Shovels, and Manuscripts, and we will see you next week.
This episode was produced by and for God's Learning Channel. If you're enjoying this series, your financial support will help us keep this program on the air. Simply send your contribution to God's Learning Channel, P.O. Box 61000, Midland, Texas 79711-1000, or log on to our website at www.glc.us.com and donate using PayPal. Please be sure to designate which program your contribution is intended to support. Thank you for helping us make unique quality programming a reality.
Order your copy of this program from the GLC bookstore by calling the numbers or visiting the website on your screen. Please include the program number when ordering.